Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us for the fifth episode of RF Breakthrough, co-hosted by the Rockefeller Foundation and MIT Energy Initiative. My name is Ashwin Dayal, and I'm the Senior Vice President of the Power and Climate Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation. Today's event is titled Powering a Green and Equitable Recovery, and we're honored to be joined in conversation today with commissioners from the Global Commission to End Energy Poverty. You can also join in the conversation online now by using the hashtag RF Breakthrough. So at this pivotal moment, as the global community comes together to pass stimulus packages and distribute and administer the first COVID-19 vaccines, the Global Commission to End Energy Poverty believes that we can and we must accelerate progress for the billions of people who still lack access to the reliable electricity, reaching universal electricity access within this decade, and helping to transform livelihoods and communities and power a truly green and equitable recovery from this crisis. Last week, the Commission released its new Electricity Access Report, which outlines an integrated distribution framework developed in collaboration with leaders and practitioners in government and the power sector, as well as investors and leaders of numerous development institutions. The framework provides us with clear guidance on how to reform electricity sectors in low-access countries to help spark economic and social development. So we're going to start today's event with a panel discussion with three members of that Global Commission who will discuss the Commission's report. And directly after that, we'll hear from energy sector leaders from first action countries who are leading efforts to end energy poverty in India, Colombia, and Nigeria. I'd like to now introduce our first three panelists, Secretary Moniz, Commission Co-Chair and former US Secretary of Energy, Dr. Rajiv Shah, Commission Co-Chair and President of the Rockefeller Foundation, and Damilola Ogunbiyi, Commissioner and CEO of Sustainable Energy for All. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Raj, I'm going to start with you and the Global Commission to End Energy Poverty. How and why did you and the Foundation determine that the world needed a commission on this topic back in 2019? And how has the relevance of the Commission's role and objectives changed, in your view, over the course of this incredible year with the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the crisis that it's brought with it?
Well, thank you, Ashwin, and I'm thrilled to be here with my co-chairs, Ernie and Damilola. And we're so excited about the findings from this commission because now we know it is not only possible to end energy poverty and thereby address perhaps the number one constraint to addressing poverty at scale around the world, but it's imperative that we do so using renewable technology and do it now as part of a recovery from the COVID-19 crisis that has so devastated communities and families all around the world. So the timing is just so important for this commission's important report. When we started in 2019, we knew that, in fact, a series of innovations and recommitment to the purpose of bringing electricity and low-cost renewable energy to people who don't have it. Nearly 1 billion people around the world effectively live in the dark and don't have any real means to improve their basic labor productivity and pull their communities out of poverty because they can't plug in and be more productive with the use of electricity and modern energy. We knew all that before the crisis. But since then, the 2020 crisis of COVID-19 and its economic fallout has threatened to push another 500 million people back into the condition of poverty around the world. And so acting now is imperative. Acting now and making investments now can not only create jobs, but they can extend electrification to 1 billion, maybe 2 billion people for whom it is the primary constraint to upward economic mobility. And the vision that the Commission has laid out requires everyone to work together, governments, scientists, technologists, companies, and is fundamentally an alternative to the vision of building more coal-fired power plants and connecting them with long transmission lines to communities all around the world. So I'm excited to be a part of this. I've learned so much from the extraordinary examples that Ernie and Damilola and so many other commissioners have set in being real innovators around the world on this topic. But I'm convinced that now is the time to act because this is the pathway out of the economic crisis and it's one that will give us a more just, more fair, and more equitable outcome many years from now.
Thank you, Raj. And I think what you're really talking about is this is a moment of intense disruption, and we need to be really thinking about this as an opportunity to build not just a response for the next year, but for the next generation. Damilola, maybe I'll bring you in now if I can. A lot of discussion is happening right now about the nexus of health and energy, because obviously all of the vaccine candidates that are being discussed that we're really excited to have coming through now require fairly sophisticated cold chain sort of delivery systems. And we know that I think barely a quarter of health centers in sub-Saharan Africa have access to reliable power. So it's clearer than ever that energy is going to be essential for the delivery of not just the vaccines, but a modern healthcare system more generally. What do you think is needed to achieve universal electrification of healthcare facilities? What opportunities do you see right now? And how can the work of this commission be leveraged to address this on a more urgent basis?
So thank you, Ashton, for having me here today. I think what I'm most excited about is that it's almost like the commission saw the foresight of almost something like this happening, right? Because the report is so relevant today. Like you said, there are about 23% of health and care centers in Africa that have electrification, but that doesn't mean that they have electrification to even cope with the vaccine. We're not sure the temperatures yet, anything from -70 to -90, which even developed countries will struggle with. We're also not sure if it's going to be 1 dose, 2 doses, a yearly dose with the flu jab. So what is critical for us is understanding and planning for that cold chain and trying to integrate it into the full integrated energy plans that we're developing with countries anyway. But it's really, really important that it's not just about the vaccine, it's about how does the vaccine get to the people that need it the most, right? Where are the epicenters that they need to get it firsthand, secondhand. And what it will do by developing these cold chains, we will need enormous amount of energy, is create a lot of opportunity for private sector. So we believe this is a private sector play to provide mostly decentralized energy sources in these communities that will need them. There's a lot of technology advances people are talking about. Is it going to be mobile? When you talk to WHO, is it going to be in certain centers? Are they going to move it around? So there are a lot of moving parts. And I think what's the great thing about this commission is that we're already thinking about what it means, right? There's an established system in the global north already that does not translate to the global south, especially in Africa, right? So this is also an opportunity to build up the health systems in Africa, because this vaccine actually has to get to everybody. And one point I wanted to add, which is based on what Raj said, is that it's important to note that we will not get to net zero by 2050 if we do not get universal access by 2030. There's sometimes a disconnect between climate and energy. And I think what COVID has done is bring that urgency to everything, and understand that especially people in Africa also have to be vaccinated unless it affects the rest of the world as well. So I'm really excited about all the innovation that's going to come out for the next year, working with the commission as well, and implementing on ground private sector focused initiatives.
Thank you, Damilola. And I think it'll be fascinating to watch how the rush to electrify the health cold chain can be brought together with the broader effort around universal electrification, and that we get sort of synergies between these two sectors. There's a lot of initiatives that seem to be emerging right now, and so it's great to have the work of the Commission to help inform that. And to the last point you made about net zero and climate crisis, that actually takes me very nicely to what I wanted to ask Ernie on this discussion. You've been a passionate advocate on the low carbon pathway issue more generally, yet we know that the climate and energy access sectors have sometimes sort of worked in silos with limited interaction and coordination, and at worst actually being viewed as having sort of almost divergent interests. So I'm curious how you see the relationship between the climate agenda and the energy access agenda today in 2020, given the world that we're living in right now. And how can innovations in the energy sector of the sort that the Commission report is proposing, how can those be leveraged to address these as a sort of twin challenge of energy poverty and climate change?
Well, thank you, Ashwin, for the question. And also, it's a pleasure to be back with Raj and Damilola. And I've missed the commissioners during this COVID dark period. But hopefully now with our decision, I think very important decision to continue the work of the commission in this year. Number one, I'm looking forward to being able to reconvene. But number two, I think it's going to give us the opportunity to break down those silos by explicitly looking as to how we can integrate the work of the Commission with the pathway to Glasgow, which is going to be such an important climate meeting in setting a vector for these next years. So first of all, let me just endorse the statements made by both Raj and Damilola that we do need to integrate the energy access issues with the climate issues. I certainly feel very strongly that when you look at the least developed economies, there's no question that those economies will need to emphasize the development. They'll need to emphasize not only serving both urban and rural communities with, for example, an effective electricity distribution framework, with the capability to support financially those entities, to start addressing in the Commission certainly the parallel track of the need for affordable fuels, modern fuels for cooking, which has the spillover effects of addressing poverty. I think in particular through empowering women, addressing the respiratory illness issues in women and children in these economies. This is what will give those economies, those people, the capability to in fact address climate, address sustainable solutions for growing the economy, for growing out of poverty. But that brings us back again to let's call it the road to Glasgow, because we need to have the developed economies, frankly, do a lot more than has been the case in terms of seeing first of all, the right thing to do, but also the important thing to do for climate change in terms of helping the least developed economies with their sustainable growth in energy supply, with electricity, as we see in the first Commission report, being the big first step to take. But remembering it's only the first step, as we also have to invest in other forms of economic development. I think the technologies are developing certainly, and we can see how renewables, but also renewables connected to electricity storage solutions, both for the relatively short term, like batteries, but also for an area that has not yet really been solved anywhere, and that is adequate storage at scale for longer durations, days, weeks, even seasons. So we have a combination of available solutions and technology development that will improve those solutions in the days ahead. I think also in a place like sub-Saharan Africa, there is going to be a role for integrating those renewables and storage with much of the natural gas being found, certainly as a step towards that net zero future that we are going to need. So bottom line is lots of opportunities, but this is a year, I think, where the Commission can really explicitly look at integrating, as I say, into the road to Glasgow, to make sure what comes out of Glasgow is much stronger national objectives in climate, but understanding that we need to put real teeth into the statement about working to support the developing economies, again, for all the reasons I said earlier.
And clearly, thank you, Ernest. And clearly, the whole question of this being a galvanizing moment, where we need sort of a global architecture to come together in both with regards to COP26 in Glasgow, and the economic recovery. And I wanted to sort of come back to you, Raj, on the sort of broader question. For the past few months, leaders have been discussing the need for a much stronger financial commitment to aid the global recovery effort from COVID-19. You've spoken of the need for the IMF and other multilateral institutions with coordinated political leadership from the G20 to provide $1 trillion of finance to support a green and equitable recovery throughout the developing world in countries that don't have the kind of fiscal space that OECD economies have. So how could such a commitment fit into the Commission's goal on ending energy poverty? And can we make the case that it makes economic sense to invest in energy access now as part of a $1 trillion effort?
Absolutely. I would say, just to put it in context, wealthier countries with their own central banks have done somewhere between 20 and 30% of gross domestic product as fiscal stimulus and monetary easing in order to support a recovery. That's critical because we are facing an economic crisis not seen since the Great Depression in terms of its impact on jobs and its impact in particular on the bottom 60 to 70% of households in any nation around the world. And at the same time, compared to that 20 to 30%, emerging markets have done about 6%. And the developing countries that are so much the focus of this commission's work have done 2%. That is a recipe for disaster 5-10 years from now. That means that people will be pushed back into poverty, not lifted up and out. It means there will be more strife and conflict and populist anger rather than a desire to cooperate to solve the world's problems. And actually, Secretary Moniz has said it in our deliberations, perhaps most clearly and powerfully amongst all of us, which is, often coming out of a major economic crisis, it is the building of large-scale energy infrastructure that creates jobs and gives people a pathway back onto an economic ladder where they can lift themselves up. 100 years ago, 50 years ago, that might have been building very large hydropower dams or other types of infrastructure. Today, that's bringing new renewable energy with the technology that Ernie talked about, the improved energy storage solutions, to the world's most impoverished communities. And it's not just an effort to address poverty. It is actually critically essential to enable a just and an equitable recovery from what is otherwise the Great Depression.
Absolutely. Thank you, Raj. So I'm going to sort of start to wrap this portion of the session up, but I'm going to ask you all sort of a quick fire final question. And Damilola, I'm going to start with you. We know that we are extending the commission to operate for at least another year because we think this is absolutely the right moment to be leaning into these questions and trying to get behind the momentum that we see. So if you had to boil it down to the one critical action that you want to see the Global Commission to End Energy Poverty take on and tackle in the year that lies ahead, what would that be?
It would have to be funding. Like Raj said, it would have to be what is the clean energy offer. It's important to note that roughly around the world, you need about 40 billion every year from now to 2030. And in Africa alone, you probably get about 3 billion of investment. You can do all the policies in the world, all the plans, but if you don't have a plan on how to fund this, people will revert back to energy systems of the past, and you won't be able to blame them. So there has to be a concerted effort to say, what is the clean energy offer to these countries? And how do we make sure it actually gets to the right people so no one is left behind? I truly believe the energy access story is a clean energy transition story. And this is the time. It's very, very critical we make it happen.
Right. So work cut out for the Commission to really put the spotlight on the funding challenge. Secretary Moniz, let me ask you the same question. What's the one thing you'd like to see the Commission tackle wholeheartedly in this year ahead?
Well, first of all, I agree with Damilola, and so I'll just address the issue now of how do we get that to happen. And here I would say I think for the commission, I'm going to be, in some sense, American self-centered here, but I think it's actually global. Look, we have a new administration coming in the United States, and President-elect Biden has appointed, in an unprecedented way, former Secretary of State Kerry as his climate envoy. I think that is an extraordinary message that the United States intends to rejoin with the community of nations addressing climate change. So I think it's our job to make sure that as the United States rejoins and hooks up with first, like the G20, for example, but also with the developing economies, to make sure that, frankly, out of Glasgow, we come out, as I said earlier, not only with a stronger commitment than came out of Paris to decarbonization, specifically the net zero that we all think is important. And frankly, I would add to that the net negative emissions economy that we need in the longer term. We have to make sure that that is integrated with the addressing Damilola's issues in terms of the financing, seeing energy access and climate change as essentially in the same breath, not as different approaches, because I think from Glasgow, we're going to have set in a very important vector for this very critical decade of addressing climate change and addressing energy access, energy poverty at the same time. So again, commission, and I'm certainly prepared as a co-chair to work to get that convergence of streams, of thought streams together for a strong result in Glasgow.
Thank you. And it's just so encouraging to see the way this conversation is heading, not just today, but in general around this need for this convergence. It feels like we truly are at a unique moment in relation to where we've previously had perhaps too many silos. Raj, maybe a final thought from you. Over and above what's been said, what do you want to see achieved in 2021 by the Commission and by the community of actors at large?
Well, I think there's a very clear answer to that in my mind, which is translating the need for political leadership that Ernie described into a very specific partnership structure that can help end energy poverty and provide the funding and financing that Damilola has made the point is so critically necessary and necessary now. We've seen in the past, 20 years ago, the world came together and created the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. Over 20 years, they've saved millions of lives by immunizing, hundreds of millions of kids. But today, they serve as the world's best bet to distribute a coronavirus vaccine in a manner that reaches everybody. Similarly, the world needs a renewed commitment to making sure these new energy technologies reach everyone. And there's a development pathway for billions of people that, in fact, is clean, is green, will protect our climate, and will create a sense of justice and equity in this recovery. We can do it in 2021. I'm thrilled to be a part of the commission and work with my great co-chairs to make it happen. The time to act is absolutely now, and the commission report is a roadmap for how to achieve this goal.
Well, thank you, Raj, and thank you, everyone, to all three of our panelists, in such a brief period of time to kind of inspire such a lively and thought-provoking conversation. I'm going to encourage everyone who's watching to continue the conversation online using the hashtag RF Breakthrough, and also to check out the Commission's new electricity access report to learn more about the specific ideas and solutions that report proposes to end energy poverty by 2030. Before I hand it over to my friend and colleague Rob Stoner of MIT's Energy Initiative for our second panel discussion, which will be with Tata Power's CEO Praveer Sinha, Diego Mesa Puyo, Minister of Energy of Colombia, and Ikoku Okeke, the CFO of Abuja Electric Distribution Company, we have a short video to share with you. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining the first half.
We're here in Parsa in rural Bihar. We're at the Tara Urja plant, which is one of the newer Smart Power India plants. In in a place like Bihar, most families will not have reliable access to low-cost power. Most businesses, more than 50%, will use diesel generation in order to create power. That's both tremendously costly and very inefficient and prevents those businesses from growing and creating jobs. The partnership between Smart Power India and Tata Power to create the world's largest solar mini-grid business is going to just transform the face of poverty in this country, and I personally believe around the world. Tremendous amount of technology, data science, and innovation that's actually transforming how rural people in Bihar get power and get electricity and have the ability to turn the lights on. A smart grid and smart metering system that allows us to communicate with the thousands of customers from this site that are able to pay automatically via their app. We will build out 10,000 of these mini grids. We'll reach 25 million people and will help them move themselves out of poverty. 400,000 farmers will have access to better irrigation and new technology and improved incomes. And we think it's going to help show the world that it's possible to end energy poverty here and around the rest of the planet.
Nearly 690 million people worldwide are undernourished. That's about 9% of people on Earth that don't get the right food or enough of it. But at the same time, growing and producing food is among the biggest contributors to climate change. So, how do we feed our planet without harming it? One idea: distributed renewable energy. Solar-powered mini-grids like this one can bring reliable power right into the fields. In Ethiopia and Kenya, the sun powers irrigation. In some of these cases, solar water pumps tripled the crop yield. Distributed renewable energy is one way to take the pressure off the environment, while giving smallholder farmers the power they need to feed our planet.
Kwa jina naitwa Janet Matayo Kabula, ni mkazi wa hapa kijiji cha Nemba. Nimeishi kwa miaka 5 na pia najishughulisha na kazi ya ushonaji. Nina miaka 3 katika kazi yangu ya ushonaji. Yaani kutokana na huduma hii hapa wajeni, naweza kufanya kazi muda wote, yani kulingana na ratiba yangu itakavyokuwa nimeipanga. Kwa sababu umeme haukatiki, unakuwepo muda wote. Faida ninayopata, nina malengo, nilifungua akaunti, nina malengo ya kutunza ile pesa mpaka nitakapofikisha ile pesa ya kununua zile mashine ninazohitaji.
We are a team of people here at PowerGen that are motivated by these 2 challenges. First, how do we build a clean energy system in Africa and avoid creating a huge carbon catastrophe in the decades ahead as this continent grows? And second, how do we solve the critical humanitarian and economic challenge of getting power to 500 million people who don't have it and unleashing the potential of the continent by doing so? The business as usual approach to this right now is for large donors to give billions of dollars to governments to build heavy infrastructure out from the center of the country. This is very expensive and often at odds with the trend globally towards distributed energy and cleaner energy. What we do is offer the governments and the donors an alternative approach to electrifying this continent in a future-proof way. PowerGen started about 7 years ago. We've grown over the years from being a leading contractor installing off-grid power systems for schools and refugee camps, tourist lodges, to now, over the last 3 or 4 years, being a market leader in microgrids.
A microgrid is a network of electricity users, usually comprising of homes, businesses, and public facilities, getting electricity from a solar power system and backup generator. Our microgrids generate 230 volts AC power, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and have up to 98% uptime.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
3 years ago, we were managing a mere 80 or so customers, and at the end of 2018, we will be managing more than 10,000 customers.
10.
PowerGen works in Kericho, Kenya, to connect 7,500 homes to the grid. I'm in the customer engagement department. We are the bridge between the customers and PowerGen. Our theme is Customer is King. We ensure all customers who call us, their issues are resolved on time and our customers are happy.
We can do 3 things well that often the traditional approach struggles with. Our focus on customer service differentiates us. We treat our customers like customers and not ratepayers, as traditional utilities typically call their customers. We can be more cost effective. Our solutions are cheaper than extending large-scale infrastructure out from the center. And lastly, we offer this conduit for new technologies coming into this market. So we're ensuring that the state-of-the-art technology that's being developed all over the world right now for energy services comes quickly to Africa. We have a lot of ambitions where at the end of 5 years, we want to manage more than 100,000 customers across Africa, serving them with clean, reliable AC power with 98 to 99% uptime. At the end of 10 years, we actually want to provide more than 1 million consumers across Africa with 24/7 AC power.
Jina langu naitwa Helen Joseph. Kazi ninayoifanya, nauza dawa, pia na saga juisi kwa kutumia blender kwa umeme wa PowerGen, na pozisha soda nauza. Faida ninayoipata inanisaidia kupeleka watoto shule. Kwanangu usiku inatusaidia muda wa usiku, mwanga, tunafundisha watoto homework. Watoto wangu wakisoma inakuwa msaada wangu baadaye. Hata kama usiponisaidia mimi, hawatakuwa tegemezi kunitegemea mimi, watajitegemea wenyewe. Kwa hiyo PowerGen itasemwa hata na wajukuu zangu kuwa mama alisaga juisi kupitia PowerGen, akauza, akapata hela, baba na mama wakasoma, tukawa hivi.
Hello, and welcome to our second panel. My name is Robert Stoner. I'm the Deputy Director of the MIT Energy Initiative, and a member of the Commission and its Secretary. I'd like to acknowledge our worldwide audience that includes visitors from Thailand, Italy, Switzerland, India, Indonesia, Turkey, the Netherlands, South Africa, Kenya, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Chile so far. Welcome to you all. I'd also like to start by thanking our partners at the Rockefeller Foundation for their support and partnership, and for the Foundation's sustained focus on this critically important issue. I'd also like to acknowledge my team, and especially my brilliant and tireless collaborator, Professor Ignacio Perez Arriaga, who's our research director, as well as the other members of our research team, including Divyam Nagpal and Gregoire Jacot and Renan Miller, who managed the project. We took on a seemingly impossible task of analyzing energy poverty globally and describing in simple terms how to end it quickly. We're talking about something that affects roughly half of humanity. Now, we allowed ourselves the luxury of narrowing the topic slightly to the electricity sector, which helps a little in scale, but it still involves billions of people all over the world. We wanted a way of talking about the problem and how to solve it that applies everywhere. A set of principles that leaders can reflect on and use to direct efforts within their borders to get everyone connected and make electricity flow to every home and every business reliably and affordably and irreversibly. We quickly identified the common weak link in the electricity system, the distribution sector. That's where the whole colossus of generating stations, transmission lines, substations, transformers, and millions of miles of wire come into contact with us, the people. We observed that companies, distribution utilities, the ones responsible for the last mile in the system, were typically in trouble, making too little revenue to afford to maintain their systems or to expand, and so providing unreliable service and reaching only a fraction of their potential customers. We also saw that they were rarely making effective use of off-grid technologies, such as the ones you saw described in the video we just saw, to help lower their costs. In fact, they were often in conflict with entrepreneurial companies offering off-grid services. And so we developed 4 deceptively simple principles. First, make a commitment to universal access in a way that leaves no one behind and can't be taken away. That means establishing an entity, a form of utility that we're all familiar with, that can't fail and has responsibility overall for providing service. Second, make efficient and coordinated use of both on and off-grid solutions. Grid extension, mini-grids, standalone systems, and integrate them into that permanent entity. This requires integrated planning and business models that allow for mixed service. Third, establish a financially viable business model for distribution. This sounds obvious and simple, but it's easy to sweep it under the rug, and it is often swept under the rug. It means establishing a revenue model for the utility that allows it to be profitable and capable of attracting investors. And without investors, you can't have private sector funds flowing in at the scale that Damilola and Ernie and Raj just pointed out in the previous panel. And finally, focus on economic development and ensure that electrification plays its role in producing broad socioeconomic benefits, as well as the intangible benefit of strengthening social equity and cohesion. It's easy to overlook. We call this set of principles the Integrated Distribution Framework, or the IDF. It's sort of obvious, we know. But here's the thing, as we say nowadays in our political sphere, you have to adhere to them all and stick with them through thick and thin. Maybe not all of them at first, but all of them eventually, without exception. To work out the kinks in the IDF, we approached our research assignment by traveling the world and engaging governments and electricity companies in countries reflecting a wide range of situations where we saw good things happening. A commitment to expanding and improving electricity access that we felt reflected the IDF principles. We found creative solutions that were working and that we wanted to be able to cite as examples to inspire others. We called these First Action Countries, or FACs. In this panel, we're going to learn about 3 First Action countries we worked with from leaders who became our collaborators and inspiration. You can join the conversation, by the way, as we speak through the Rockefeller Twitter handle, #RFBreakthrough. So let me introduce our guests and then get down to a discussion. First is Praveer Sinha, who's a commissioner, as well as the CEO of Tata Power, an integrated power company that operates throughout India. Second, Diego Mesa Puyo, Minister of Energy in Colombia, who's speaking to us today from Chile, and Ije Ikoku Okeke, who's also a commissioner and the CFO of Abuja Electric Distribution Company. She's speaking from Abuja, and we've been having trouble keeping her on the line. And so I'm not sure we're going to be able to hear from her, but if not, I'll step in and describe the situation. So let me turn first to Praveer and ask you, Praveer, as I will the other panelists, tell us about the particular challenges you face in India and how you're approaching them in ways that align with the IDF.
Thank you, Rob, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this discussion. Let me try to briefly share with you the incredible India story. And we saw in the video Raj mentioning about the 10,000 microgrids, which is the biggest initiative of microgrids worldwide, which jointly Tata Power and Rockefeller Foundation started about a year back, last year in November. And since then, we've actually done 100, and we are in the process of implementing another 100. But it's a long story for us in the sense that we need to do 10,000 of them. And COVID naturally has not helped us. But there are three dimensions that I would like to share with you. First is, we heard Ernest mentioning about the necessity of green energy, decarbonized energy, distributed energy. And I think the best example of distributed green energy is the microgrid solution that we are trying to do in India. It consists of the solar panels, it consists of the storage battery, and we started with the DG set as a backup. But I'm happy to share with you that only yesterday we commissioned our first biogas plant, which will feed a 5 kilowatt machine and will produce nearly 37 units of energy, which we will be distributing. So we are actually going to be fully green in the next few hundred microgrids that we would be setting for ourselves. The second aspect is the technology. How do we make this affordable? Because while microgrids have been there, they have been quite expensive because the cost of generating in a rural environment restricts the economic gains of these companies. And it was very, very important for us to bring down the cost so that it becomes affordable. The second aspect is, how do we ensure that we create the right ecosystem for the users? And when we talk of the users, it's not only the domestic users or the residential users, but also the industrial and commercial users. How do we support them in creating the right micro enterprises, whether it is through funding or supporting them with the right type of equipments which are highly efficient and are user friendly, whether it is the rice or the flour mill or any of the other activities that can be carried out in a rural area. And the third dimension that we are looking is, can this be a precursor to the socio-economic change that will happen over there, especially the empowerment that will happen to the women and children over there? Can this lead to digital classroom? Can this lead to digital health system, and healthcare can be provided digitally to the people in those locations? Can this provide digital market where the farmer is in a position to know what's the market of their produce in any other part and how they can sell it over there? So I think that this is a great agent of change that will happen in rural areas. And while we initially started with off-grid microgrid solutions in the villages, we are now going to try of having even an on-grid solution in some of the utilities in eastern part of India, in one of the states where we have recently got the license to distribute electricity. And we feel that this will bring huge amount of hope to the people, especially people in rural areas who go to urban areas. They would be in a much better position to stay back in the villages and create an economic activity to sustain themselves. So I think the initiative which has been taken by Rockefeller and the breakthrough initiatives along with will be a game changer. The energy will be used in the rural parts of India. And I'm sure with the type of support and work that we are doing through the Global Commission, we'll be able to reach out to millions of people right across the country. So these are my opening comments, and I'll be open to take some questions later. Thank you.
Thanks, Praveer. We'll come back to you. Ije is unable to join us, so we'll go directly to Minister Mesa Puyo. Diego, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
It's the same question, really. Could you also describe the very different situation that you're contending with in Colombia, in rural areas?
Sure, Robert, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here with this distinguished panel. Colombia, the main issue that we have right now is trying to close that energy access gap. In Colombia, to give you a bit of context, we have about 500,000 households that doesn't have access to electricity, that are in the off-grid zones. I think the main challenges that we have, I'll summarize those into three baskets. First one is lack of information. We still have issues identifying what are the capacity of these Colombian citizens to pay for electricity, what are the energy needs, and in some cases even their specific location to be able to develop solutions that can meet the requirements. Second one, obviously we have a financial issue with the sustainability of projects. We're obviously working in trying to use variable renewables, mostly solar PVs, but in some areas, the projects that we have are still not sustainable from a financial point of view, taking into account the payment and the capacity to pay of the users. And obviously related to that one is the high investment cost upfront that we've calculated to be able to close this gap. As I said, we have 500,000 households, but what we're trying to work on is, and we work with the Commission, obviously, and the Director of Research of the Commission with a solution. We're focusing on 5 key areas at the moment, Robert. Obviously doing integrated planning, trying to bring more private investment into the solutions. So we're looking at maybe having a concession scheme for some areas of the country in which we think we can bring private funds. We're also working on having one single agency that is specialized in trying to structure and implement the solutions. We also have multiple funds. We're trying to unify all of those funds into a single pocket. And we also are working on having a single window for presenting energy projects. And obviously this is complemented with working on better governance, because we have departments or provinces that are also responsible for electricity services in some areas, and to make sure that we have a good information management system. So I'll summarize, those are the fronts that we're working on, but I'd be happy to develop further these points as we go along in the discussion.
Well, thanks. Let's just stay with you for a moment then. I'm somewhat familiar with Colombia, having traveled to the Orinoco a number of times. These are very rural populations, in many cases, quite far from the grid, and socially excluded in many cases. And I'm intrigued by how you're using the electrification process to sort of engage these people socially and make them part of the system. Can you talk about that a little bit and the sort of utility role of electrification?
Sure, and as you said, and from a social point of view, but also from an economic point of view, we're using an electrification in rural areas to not only bring energy, but also bring connectivity, for example, and access to markets. And in that front, we're working heavily to use resources from royalties that are paid by the mining and the oil and gas sector to prioritize electrification in rural areas and bringing connectivity and what we call tertiary roads to being able to connect this Colombian citizens to the rest of the country. We've seen very good experiences, for example, when we bring solar panels, for example, how these people can also have their own businesses, small businesses, mostly rural entrepreneurship activities, such as raising chicken and cows, and also expanding their crops with the use of electricity to increase productivity. So we absolutely see access to energy and electrification in rural areas as a key component of our social policy in some of the areas, as you mentioned, the Orinoco, Amazonia, also in the Pacific coast, which we have many towns that are operating.
Exciting, thank you, and really a great example of this fourth pillar I mentioned of the IDF of a coordinated policy response that goes beyond electrification and includes sort of social and economic aspects. Praveer, let's come back to you and talk about the third situation. You mentioned your ongoing work in Odisha, where you've been acquiring distribution concessions. And could you talk a little bit about the approach you're taking to dealing with far-flung rural communities within the concession?
What we are trying to do is do a cost-benefit analysis to see whether it makes sense to have off-grid solution, or should we have an on-grid solution? Because as soon as you have an on-grid solution, it means that you need to maintain the transmission system, you need to maintain the electrical system over there, and there is an added cost of that. So can you use the existing lines which is there in the villages, generate locally and distribute rather than transferring this energy over a large distance and avoiding the transmission loss and the added cost of maintenance? So I think what we need to do is at the end of the day, we need to be conscious of the fact that our cost of energy has to be low, and the consumers over there get the quality service which they would have got with the off-grid solution. And when we, of course, talk about energy in rural areas in India, while the access has been provided by the government and the necessary network is there, it does not mean that the electricity is there 24/7. And I always say that many a times it means 24 hours of supply in 7 days. So it's not a one-day supply. So how do we ensure that the consumer in the villages get electricity when they want and not when they are sleeping or when they are not actually utilizing that energy? And we will get a very good experience implementing this in Odisha. And we feel that once we are successful with the model, both in terms of the technology and the cost, we should be able to scale it up to other parts of the country. And not only in India, these solutions can definitely be used in other parts of the world also. So we are very excited about this opportunity. This is a great learning opportunity for us. And we strongly believe that with the type of support that we have been getting from Rockefeller Foundation, we will be able to take this not only to 10,000 villages, but maybe many more than that.
It's just such a great example of bringing everything together under a properly organized utility operating in a concession, using on and off grid technologies in a complementary way to improve service and reduce costs. We've explored it extensively in our report, and it's a model that I think is probably very scalable. And I wonder, what do you think the opportunity is in India to use these principles to expand access in other states as well? Is this a big opportunity, or is it unique to Odisha?
I think it's a great opportunity. In fact, there's already discussion going on with some of the other states that can we do a pilot in their state and see if this can really be scaled up and tried and tested over there. So I think going forward, this will be very, very unique in terms of a solution whereby decentralized and green energy can be provided to the people in the villages, and you don't have to actually worry about bringing energy from large distance. So I think the real benefit of this decentralized energy will be felt if we can really scale up the microgrids, which can supply to the load centers in the villages rather than supplying them from large generating plants in thousands of miles or thousands of kilometers.
Minister Mesa, Puyo, what about the intervention that you've developed in Colombia, and to what extent is that sort of scalable in other parts of Central and South America, for example?
I do think the experience here is scalable, and the reason, Robert, is that we have many different type of topography in Colombia. So we've been able to reach areas that are in the mountains, areas in the northern part of the country, which are mostly desert lands, and also both on the Pacific and on the Atlantic coast. So we have to, we decide which mechanism and which scheme is the better suited for the type of population and the type of locations that we have the household off-grid. But certainly is scalable to other parts of South America and Central America.
Great. Well, thank you both, and good luck in your continued efforts to implement your programs and to expand them to the greatest extent possible. We'll be coming back to you in the course of next year as we resume with the Commission in an effort to make these ideas known and help promulgate them in different parts of the world. I'd like to thank you both for taking the time to join us and for your commitment to our work as well. I'd also like to thank Ikoku in absentia, who wasn't able to connect, unfortunately, in the end, but whose work in Nigeria we describe in our report. Please do have a look at that report. It's featured on our website, www.endenergypoverty.org. And I encourage you also to continue the discussion, which is taking place through Twitter, through the hashtag RF breakthrough handle. And so with that, along with thanking the members of our previous panel and our hosts at the Rockefeller Foundation, and all of you who've joined us from around the world, thank you. We look forward to hearing from you and to working together in the future. Bye.